Welcome to the Daily Text Review for Friday, December 19th, 2025. Today's scripture is 1 John 4:7. Continue loving one another. It is easy to love when things are going well, but what about when a brother or sister acts thoughtlessly? In this video, we discuss how Jehovah sets the perfect example. He loves his faithful servants despite their shortcomings and does not stay resentful. We explore why it is vital to imitate our forgiving Father. As we overlook mistakes and apply Bible principles, we strengthen the bond of our brotherhood, which is essential for our spiritual survival. Imagine a situation that is all too common in our busy lives, a scenario that tests the very fabric of our Christian patience and brotherly affection. It is a humid, overcast Saturday morning. You have volunteered to help a family in your congregation move to a new apartment on the third floor of a building without an elevator. The joy of service was high at 8 in the morning, but now it is past noon. Your muscles are aching, your shirt is soaked with sweat, and you are hungry. You and a close friend, a brother you have known for years and shared many meals with, are struggling to maneuver a massive, heavy oak dresser down a narrow, twisting staircase. Your fingers are slipping and your grip is failing. Pivot, you call out, but the angle is wrong. Suddenly, the weight shifts unexpectedly. The sharp corner of the dresser gouges deep into the freshly painted drywall, leaving a jagged, ugly scar. The homeowner gasps audibly. Your friend, exhausted and stressed by the pressure of the day, drops his end of the furniture and snaps at you with a voice that echoes in the stairwell. "What is wrong with you? Can't you pay attention? You're just making a mess of everything." The words sting like a physical slap across the face. The unfairness of the accusation washes over you in a hot wave of emotion. You didn't mean to slip. You have been working just as hard as he has, sacrificing your weekend. In that split second, the atmosphere in the room changes from one of brotherly cooperation to icy, palpable tension. Your heart races, not from exertion, but from indignation. A dozen defensive retorts spring to your lips. You want to remind him of his own clumsiness earlier in the day. You want to drop the dresser and walk away. But then you look at him. You see the dark circles under his eyes, the tremor in his hands from fatigue, and you remember the stress of his own personal family problems that you know he is carrying silently. You stand at a spiritual crossroads. You can escalate the conflict, protecting your pride, or you can absorb the blow. You take a deep breath, swallow your pride, and say calmly, "I'm sorry. Let's take a break, drink some water, and try again." This small, gritty, unglamorous moment is where the real battle for Christian love is fought. It is easy to love our brothers when we are sitting comfortably at a convention, singing kingdom songs. It is infinitely harder when we are tired, stressed, and rubbing shoulders in the friction of daily life. The Apostle John, the disciple whom Jesus loved deeply and who rested his head on Jesus' chest, wrote the profound words of our theme text today: "Continue loving one another." It is significant that he used the word continue. This implies that showing love is not a one-time event or a permanent state of being that happens automatically once we are baptized. No, it implies that there will be legitimate reasons not to love. It implies that there will be obstacles, interruptions, and failures that threaten to stop that flow of love. John was writing to imperfect men and women living in a hostile world, people who had different backgrounds, different personalities, and different boiling points. He knew that the congregation was not a museum of perfect saints, but a hospital for recovering sinners. He knew that maintaining love requires a conscious, daily fight against our own ego and our own imperfect tendencies. We must learn to look past the surface behavior to the intent of the heart, recognizing that our brothers are fighting battles we may know nothing about. To help us understand this complex dynamic of failure, friction, resentment, and ultimate restoration, let us examine the life of a young man who walked alongside the apostles, John Mark. His story is one of the most human and relatable narratives in the Christian Greek scriptures. It is a powerful testament to how a relationship can be broken by disappointment and rebuilt by loyal love, becoming a lifeline during the darkest of times. John Mark grew up in a privileged spiritual environment in the city of Jerusalem. His mother, Mary, was a prominent disciple, and her home was a hub for the early congregation. It was likely the very house where the disciples gathered to pray and where Peter went immediately after his miraculous release from prison by the angel. Mark was surrounded by spiritual giants from his youth. He heard the fervent prayers, saw the miracles, and felt the electricity of the Holy Spirit in action. He likely saw Jesus himself during his ministry. He had every advantage a young Christian could hope for. When Paul and Barnabas completed their relief mission to Jerusalem, they saw potential in this young man. They invited him to join them on their first missionary tour. Imagine the surge of excitement Mark must have felt. He was going on a grand adventure to spread the good news to the nations. He probably envisioned himself standing before crowds, seeing mass conversions, and participating in the glorious expansion of the truth. He was full of zeal, but perhaps he was short on experience. He packed his bags, said goodbye to his mother, and boarded the ship. They sailed to the island of Cyprus, the home of his cousin Barnabas, and things went well. They traversed the island, witnessing and teaching. But then they crossed over the sea to the mainland, arriving at Perga in Pamphylia. Here, the reality of the missionary work set in. The environment changed drastically. They were no longer in familiar territory. They were facing a journey into the dangerous, rugged Taurus Mountains. This was an area notorious in the ancient world for bandits, treacherous rushing rivers, and perhaps most frightening of all to a young man, widespread malaria. The romance of the mission faded rapidly, replaced by the harsh grit of survival. We do not know exactly what went through Mark's mind in Perga. Was he struck by a sudden bout of homesickness? Was he terrified of the stories of mountain robbers? Was he physically ill, suffering from the swamp fever that plagued the coast? Or did he perhaps resent the subtle shift in leadership as Paul began to take the lead over his cousin Barnabas? Whatever the specific reason, the pressure cracked his resolve. At this critical juncture, Mark made a decision that would haunt him for years. He abandoned his assignment. He turned his back on the work, left Paul and Barnabas to face the dangers alone, and returned to the safety and comfort of his mother's house in Jerusalem. To the Apostle Paul, a man of intense focus, discipline, and self-sacrifice, this was not just a moment of youthful weakness. It was a betrayal of the sacred work. It was a failure of loyalty in the face of the enemy. Paul, who had endured so much, likely saw Mark's departure as a sign of a lack of faith, a character flaw that disqualified him from serious service. Years later, the consequences of this failure surfaced with painful intensity. When Paul and Barnabas were planning their second missionary journey, this old wound was ripped open. Barnabas, whose name means son of comfort, wanted to bring his cousin Mark along again. He saw that the young man was sorry. He saw the potential for recovery. Barnabas wanted to apply the principle that love covers a multitude of sins. He believed in second chances. He looked at Mark and saw a future elder, a future writer of a gospel. But Paul was adamant. He did not think it was proper to take a man who had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. To Paul, the mission was too important to risk another failure. The disagreement was not a polite difference of opinion between two brothers. The Bible record is honest and raw. It says there was a sharp burst of anger. Think of it. Two pillars of the early Christian congregation, men who had suffered together, prayed together, and established congregations together, were now shouting at each other because of the imperfection of a brother. The contention was so severe that they could not resolve it. they separated. Paul chose Silas and went one way, and Barnabas took Mark and sailed away to Cyprus. This split must have sent shockwaves through the early congregations. It showed that even those with Holy Spirit could have deep conflicts. At this point in the story, it would have been very easy for John Mark to give up entirely. He could have been crushed by the rejection of the Apostle Paul. He could have reasoned, if Paul, the chosen vessel to the nations, thinks I am useless, then I must be useless. Jehovah must not want me. He could have let resentment fester in his heart, telling anyone who would listen how harsh, unloving, and rigid Paul was. He could have become a victim of his own failure. But Mark did not do that. He did not let one mistake define his entire service to Jehovah. Under the patient, loving mentorship of Barnabas, Mark went to work on himself. He humbled himself. He learned that reliability is the other side of the coin of love. He worked on his spiritual qualities, growing from a fearful youth into a steady, reliable man of God. He likely spent time with Peter as well, who refers to him in his first letter as "my son Mark," indicating a deep fatherly bond of training. Time passed, perhaps a decade or more. The scene shifts dramatically. Paul is no longer the free traveler hiking through the mountains of Asia Minor. He is a prisoner in Rome, bound in chains for the sake of the good news. He is facing his own mortality, awaiting execution under the reign of Nero. The fair-weather friends have disappeared. The summer soldiers have gone home, afraid of being associated with a condemned man. In this dark, cold, and lonely time, who does Paul need? In his second letter to Timothy, written from that grim prison context, Paul writes one of the most beautiful sentences of redemption in the entire Bible. "Bring Mark along with you, for he is useful to me for ministering." What a transformation! The man who was once labeled a deserter was now useful. The brother who had caused a sharp burst of anger was now a source of deep comfort. Mark had become exactly what Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17 describes, a brother who is born for times of distress. Paul, too, had changed. He had softened. He had learned to forgive. He realized that the young man who fled in Perga was not the same man who now stood ready to serve. Paul did not hold a grudge. He did not keep a record of the injury. He imitated Jehovah, who, as Psalm 103 verse 9 reminds us, will not always find fault, nor will he stay resentful forever. Paul allowed Mark to come back into his heart. This restoration of trust was vital, because in prison you cannot survive alone. You need someone you can trust implicitly, someone who will bring you food, warm clothes, and scrolls, regardless of the danger of being seen with a prisoner. This brings us directly to the vital lesson for our day. We are living deep in the time of the end. The pressures of this system are grinding us down. In this environment, our brothers and sisters will inevitably annoy us, disappoint us, or hurt us. They may speak thoughtlessly, like the friend moving the sofa. They may fail us in a moment of need, like Mark in Pamphylia. If someone fails to show a Christian quality, what is our immediate reaction? Do we judge? Do we withdraw? The source material encourages us to adopt a specific mindset. We can assume that he wants to follow Bible principles and that he simply acted thoughtlessly. This is the benefit of the doubt. It is choosing to believe that the brother's motive was not malicious, but that he is struggling with his own imperfections, stress, or limitations. Proverbs 12:18 tells us that thoughtless speech is like the stabs of a sword. Yes, the pain is real. It hurts to be stabbed. But the verse goes on to say that the tongue of the wise is a healing. We can be the wise ones. We can choose to heal the situation rather than infect it with resentment. We must remember that Jehovah loves his faithful servants despite their shortcomings. He sees the good in them, just as Barnabas saw the good in Mark. If Jehovah does not cut us off when we make mistakes, who are we to cut off our brothers? Who are we to declare someone useless because they disappointed us once? We must imitate our forgiving Father, actively looking for reasons to show mercy rather than reasons to justify our anger. We must be quick to forgive, knowing that we too need forgiveness every single day for our own failings. There is an even more urgent reason to learn this lesson now. As the commentary notes, as the end draws near, we need to remain close to our brothers and sisters. Why is this so critical? Because persecution is going to intensify. We may lose our freedom. We may find ourselves in situations where our very survival depends on the person sitting next to us in the kingdom hall, the very person who might annoy us today. If we cannot forgive a thoughtless comment now, how will we trust them with our lives then? We must build the bonds of love so strong that they can withstand the crushing weight of opposition. Our spiritual family must be tighter than any biological family. The love we cultivate now is the survival gear we will need then. Consider the powerful modern-day example of Brother Joseph, an elder in Spain, which was highlighted in our study material. He and other brothers were imprisoned for their Christian neutrality. Prison is a pressure cooker. It strips away your privacy, your dignity, and your patience. Brother Joseph recalls, in prison, the risk of becoming irritated with a fellow believer was high because we had no privacy. We had to put up with one another and forgive one another freely. Imagine sharing a tiny cell, smelling each other's sweat, hearing each other snore, witnessing each other's most private habits. In such a setting, small things can become torturous. A brother chewing loudly, humming a tune, or taking too long to wash could become a source of intense irritation that leads to division. The devil would love to use those small irritations to drive a wedge between brothers. But look at what that unity produced. Joseph explains, this helped us stay united and protected. We were surrounded by inmates who did not serve Jehovah. The unity of the brothers was a shield against the predatory environment of the prison. And then came the moment of distress. Joseph was injured. His arm was in a cast. He was helpless, unable to perform basic tasks for himself. In that moment of vulnerability, who stepped up? One of my brothers washed my clothes and cared for me in other practical ways. Here we see the spirit of John Mark in action. Here we see the brother born for times of distress. Imagine the humility it took for that brother to wash Joseph's dirty prison clothes by hand. That is not a glamorous task. It is not standing on a platform giving a talk. It is an act of service, born of genuine, gritty love. If Joseph had held a grudge against that brother from a previous argument, perhaps over who slept on which bunk or who ate the last piece of bread, that bond might have been broken. But because they had learned to forgive one another freely, the channel of love was open when it was needed most. Joseph said, I experienced sincere love when I needed it most. This is the reality we must prepare for. The persecution we face in the future may involve physical hardship, where we are physically reliant on one another for food, shelter, and care. We cannot afford the luxury of holding grudges. We need to resolve problems with one another now. We cannot wait until the Great Tribulation starts to learn how to forgive. If you have a difference with a brother or sister, settle it today. View it as training for the future. Look at that brother who irritates you and say to yourself, one day he might be the one washing my clothes in a prison cell. One day I might be the one bringing him food when he is sick. One day he might save my life. This perspective changes everything. It shrinks our petty grievances down to their proper size and magnifies the importance of our spiritual bond. It helps us to widen out in our affections, making room for the different personalities that make up Jehovah's people. We must also realize that when we forgive, we are not just doing the other person a favor, we are keeping ourselves spiritually fit. Resentment is a poison that weakens us. It drains our joy and distracts us from the ministry. Paul knew that if he stayed angry at Mark, he would only be hurting himself and the work. By forgiving, he gained a valuable co-worker. By forgiving, we gain companions who will stand back to back with us against the world. We prove that we are true disciples of Jesus, characterized by the love that prevails even when human imperfection tries to tear it apart. We demonstrate that the Spirit of God is more powerful than our fleshly tendencies. Think of the relief John Mark must have felt when he walked into that Roman prison and saw the smile on Paul's face. The past was buried. The awkwardness was gone. There was only the bond of shared service and brotherly affection. That is the destination we are all heading toward. We are heading toward a new world where all misunderstandings will be things of the past, where human perfection will finally allow us to love without friction. But until that day arrives, we have the privilege of practicing that love in its most resilient form, forgiveness. So the next time a brother acts thoughtlessly, or a sister forgets a promise, or a friend snaps at you in stress, pause. Remember the rainy day moving boxes. Remember John Mark turning back at Perga. Remember the cast on Brother Joseph's arm. Choose to be the one who covers the error. Choose to be the one who assumes good intent. Choose to be the brother born for times of distress. By doing so, you are weaving a cord of unity that Satan cannot snap. A cord that will hold you and your brothers together through the storm and safe onto the shore of Jehovah's new world. How wonderful it is to serve a God who does not define us by our worst moments, but who lovingly helps us grow into the brothers and sisters we were meant to be.